Lucy Bennett had worked in the ambassador's household for 2 years. Every morning, she woke up before the twin suns rose over Harmony Prime. Every night, she fell asleep with aching feet and tired hands. But she never complained. The money she earned went straight to Earth, to her 6-year-old daughter Mia, who lived with Lucy's elderly mother in a small apartment in Ohio. The work was hard, but Lucy had learned to survive. She kept her head down. She spoke only when spoken to. She made herself invisible, which was exactly what the Valorians wanted from their human servants. The Valorians were tall beings with pale blue skin and silver eyes. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy. They spoke with voices that sounded like music. And they believed, with absolute certainty, that they were better than every other species in the galaxy. Ambassador Corvith was different from most Valorians. He was not cruel to his servants. He did not raise his voice or threaten punishment for small mistakes. But he was still Valorian, and Lucy knew better than to expect kindness. Tolerance was the best she could hope for. Today was different. Today, the entire household was preparing for something special. Ambassador Corvith's fiancée was arriving. Lucy had heard the rumors. The fiancée was human. A human woman had somehow captured the heart of one of the most powerful Valorian diplomats in the galaxy. The other servants whispered about it in corners. Some were hopeful. Maybe things would change. Maybe a human in a position of power would make their lives easier. Others were afraid. The High Counselor, Corvith's father, was coming to the estate for the engagement ceremony. Everyone knew Draven hated humans. His presence meant danger. Lucy tried not to think about it. She had work to do. The grand hall was filled with decorations. Flowers from 12 different worlds hung from the ceiling. Tables were covered with silk cloths that cost more than Lucy earned in a year. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal made of crystal, stood an ancient Valorian vase. Commander Sayla, the head of household security, had warned all the servants about the vase. It was over 3,000 years old. It had belonged to Corvith's ancestors. It was worth more than a human could earn in 10 lifetimes. Lucy stayed far away from it. The fiancée arrived in the afternoon. Her name was Grace Holloway, and she was nothing like Lucy expected. Grace was a woman in her early 30s with warm, brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She wore a blue dress that was elegant but not flashy. When she walked into the grand hall, she did not look around with the nervous excitement of someone trying to impress. She looked calm, confident, like she belonged there. But what surprised Lucy most was what happened next. Grace walked up to the line of servants who stood waiting to greet her. This was normal. The servants were supposed to bow and say nothing. But Grace stopped in front of each one and asked their name. When she reached Lucy, she smiled. "And what is your name?" Lucy's voice came out as a whisper. "Lucy, ma'am." "Lucy Bennett." "It is nice to meet you, Lucy," Grace said. Her voice was kind, real, not the fake politeness that some guests used when they wanted to seem generous. Then Grace moved on, and the moment passed. But Lucy felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The banquet was scheduled for that evening. Diplomats from across the galaxy would attend. It was meant to celebrate the engagement, but everyone knew it was really a test. High Counselor Draven wanted to see if Grace was worthy of his son. And everyone knew what he expected to find. Lucy was assigned to help arrange the final decorations. She carried a tray of crystal glasses toward the main table. The room was crowded with servants rushing in every direction. Someone bumped her shoulder. She stumbled. The tray flew from her hands. She reached out desperately, trying to catch the glasses. Her body twisted. Her elbow struck something solid. Time seemed to slow down. Lucy watched in horror as the ancient vase tipped off its pedestal. It fell through the air like a dying bird. And then it hit the floor. The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the hall. Every person in the room froze. Every eye turned to Lucy. She stood there, surrounded by broken pieces that sparkled like tears on the floor. Her heart stopped. Her breath stopped. Everything stopped. Commander Sayla appeared within seconds. The Valorian woman was tall and cold, with eyes like frozen silver. She grabbed Lucy's arm with a grip that would leave bruises. "You stupid creature," Sayla hissed. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Lucy could not speak. Her whole body was shaking. Sayla dragged her to the center of the room. Other servants stepped back, their faces filled with fear and pity. The Valorian guests watched with expressions that ranged from boredom to amusement. "This human has destroyed a priceless artifact," Sayla announced. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Under Valorian law, she will face justice." Public flogging followed by 10 years in a labor camp. Lucy's legs gave out. She fell to her knees on the hard floor. 10 years. Her daughter would be 16 by the time she was free. If she survived, the labor camps were not meant for survival. They were meant for punishment. "Please," Lucy whispered. Then louder, "Please, I beg you. I have a daughter. She's only 6 years old. She needs me. Please, I will do anything. Any other punishment. Please show mercy." Tears ran down her face. She did not care about her pride anymore. She did not care that the Valorians were watching her cry like she was an animal. She only cared about Maya, her little girl with the bright smile who sent her drawings of flowers every month. Sayla looked down at her with disgust. Mercy is not part of Valorian justice. Some of the Valorian guests laughed softly. One of them said something about humans being emotional creatures. Another commented that this was good entertainment before dinner. Lucy sobbed on the floor, her hands pressed against the cold stone. This was the end. Everything she had worked for. Everything she had sacrificed. Gone. Then she heard footsteps. The room went quiet. Lucy looked up through her tears. Grace Holloway stood in the doorway. She wore a simple gown for the evening banquet. Her expression was calm, unreadable. She looked at the broken vase, at the laughing guests, at Sayla's cruel smile, and at Lucy crying on the floor. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Grace stepped forward, and the entire room fell silent. Grace walked slowly across the grand hall. Her footsteps were soft, but in the silence, they sounded like thunder. Every eye followed her. Every breath was held. She stopped in the center of the room, placing herself directly between Lucy and Commander Sayla. The two women faced each other. Sayla was taller, stronger, and had the full authority of Valorian law behind her. Grace was just a human, but Grace did not look afraid. "Commander Sayla," Grace said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Before you carry out this punishment, I would like you to explain the law to me." Sayla's silver eyes narrowed. "The law is simple. The servant damaged property. The servant must pay." "Please be more specific," Grace said. "I want to understand the exact legal code you are using." A murmur went through the crowd. Some of the Valorian guests looked annoyed. Others looked curious. This was not how humans were supposed to behave. Humans were supposed to accept Valorian authority without question. Sayla smiled coldly. She clearly thought Grace was trying to delay the inevitable. "Very well. Under Valorian Household Code, Section 12, when a servant causes damage to property, the servant is held personally responsible. The punishment is determined by the value of the property. For an artifact of this worth, the punishment is public discipline followed by 10 years of labor service." "Thank you," Grace said. "And what about Section 15? Sayla's smile flickered. "Section 15? "Yes, the section regarding debt transfer within bonded households." The room went completely still. Lucy looked up from the floor, confused. She did not understand what was happening. Sayla's face hardened. That section is not relevant here. I disagree, Grace said. Section 15 clearly states that any member of a bonded family may claim responsibility for a servant's debt. The family member assumes the financial obligation, and the servant is released from punishment. You are not a family member, Sayla snapped. You are just the ambassador's guest. Actually, I am not. Grace reached into a small pocket of her gown and pulled out a thin data card. She held it up for everyone to see. This is the official filing of my engagement to Ambassador Corvith. It was submitted to the Valorian Registry 3 days ago and accepted yesterday. According to your own laws, I am now a pre-bonded member of this household. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Some of the Valorians looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few, Lucy noticed, looked impressed. Sayla grabbed the data card and examined it. Her jaw tightened. She could not argue with official documents. This is ridiculous, Sayla said. You cannot use our own customs to protect a clumsy servant. This is not what the law was meant for. The law is the law, Grace said simply. You told me yourself. Section 15 makes no distinction about the reason for invoking it. It only requires that the family member accept the financial debt. And I accept it. From the back of the room, a holographic screen flickered to life. A face appeared on it. High Counselor Draven. His pale blue skin seemed even colder through the projection. His silver eyes burned with anger. What is the meaning of this? Draven demanded. His voice echoed through the hall like ice cracking. Father, a new voice said. Ambassador Corvith stepped out from a side door. He looked between the hologram of his father, his fiancée, and the crying servant on the floor. His expression was troubled. Grace is simply trying to resolve the situation peacefully. Peacefully? Draven laughed, but there was no warmth in it. She's making a mockery of our traditions. A human, using Valorian law to protect another human. This is exactly what I warned you about, Corvith. This woman does not respect our ways. I respect your laws very much, Grace said. She turned to face the hologram directly. Most humans would not dare to meet the High Counselor's eyes. Grace did not look away. I have studied them carefully. I understand that your culture values honor and duty above all else. But I also understand that true honor is not about punishing the weak. It is about protecting them. Draven's face twisted with disgust. You understand nothing. You are a primitive creature from a primitive world. You think you can lecture us about honor? I think I can follow your laws, Grace replied. Which is exactly what I am doing. If you believe I am wrong, please show me where in Section 15 it says a pre-bonded family member cannot claim a servant's debt. Draven opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. His eyes moved to someone off-screen. He was consulting with his advisors. After a long moment, his expression became even colder. This is not over, he said. Then the hologram disappeared. The room was silent. Sayla still held the data card in her hand. She looked at it, then at Grace, then at the crowd of watching diplomats. The debt, Sayla said through clenched teeth, is 50 million credits. Lucy gasped. 50 million. It was an impossible number. No human could pay that. But Grace did not hesitate. She pulled out another data card and handed it to Sayla. Transfer the funds from my personal account. You will find that the balance is sufficient. Sayla's eyes widened. She checked the card. Her face went pale. Grace Holloway, a human woman from a colony world, had 50 million credits in her personal account. More than enough to cover the debt. The matter is settled, Grace said. The debt is paid. The servant is released. Sayla looked like she wanted to argue. But the law was clear. The debt was paid. There was nothing more she could do. Slowly, Hatefully, Sayla nodded. The servant is released. She dropped a data card and walked away. The other Valorian guards followed her. One by one, the crowd began to move again. Conversation started. Some guests looked offended. Others whispered to each other with something that might have been admiration. Lucy still knelt on the floor. She was shaking too hard to stand. She could not believe what had just happened. This woman, this human woman she had met only hours ago, had just saved her life. Had just given up 50 million credits for a servant she did not know. Grace walked over to Lucy. She looked down at her with gentle eyes. "Are you hurt?" Grace asked. Lucy shook her head. She could not find words. Grace held out her hand. "Then let me help you up." Lucy stared at the offered hand. In 2 years of working in this household, no one had ever offered to help her stand. She had always been expected to pick herself up, to be invisible, to disappear. She took Grace's hand. Grace's grip was firm and warm. She pulled Lucy to her feet. "I am so sorry," Lucy whispered. "The vase. The money. I can never repay you." Grace smiled. It was a real smile, full of kindness. "You do not need to repay me, and you do not need to apologize. It was an accident. But why?" Lucy's voice cracked. "Why would you do this for me? You do not even know me." Grace was quiet for a moment. She looked around the grand hall, at the wealthy guests, at the expensive decorations, at all the symbols of power and privilege. Then she looked back at Lucy. "Because no one should have to kneel and beg for mercy," Grace said softly. "Not in my house. Not ever." She gave Lucy's hand a gentle squeeze. Then she turned and walked toward Ambassador Corvith, who stood watching with an expression that mixed pride with fear. Lucy stood alone in the middle of the grand hall. Around her, servants were already beginning to clean up the broken vase. The banquet would continue. The diplomats would eat and drink and pretend nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that Lucy would never forget. A human woman had stood against an empire. And she had won. The news spread like fire through dry grass. By the next morning, every news channel on Harmony Prime was talking about the incident at Ambassador Corvith's estate. A human woman had used Valorian law to protect a servant. She had paid 50 million credits. She had looked the High Counselor in the eye and challenged him. The Valorian social networks exploded with outrage. How dare a human use their sacred customs? How dare she embarrass one of the oldest families in the Empire? Some called for Grace to be expelled from Valorian space. Others demanded that Corvith end the engagement immediately. But there were other voices too. Quieter voices. Valorians who whispered that maybe Grace had done something honorable. That maybe standing up for the powerless was not weakness, but strength. These voices were small, but they existed. In the servants' quarters of the estate, Lucy sat on her narrow bed and stared at the wall. She had not slept all night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the vase falling. She heard the sound of it breaking. She felt the cold grip of Commander Sayla's hand on her arm. And then she saw Grace, standing between her and punishment, offering her hand. A soft knock came at the door. Lucy jumped up, suddenly afraid. Had they changed their minds? Had they found some way around the law? The door opened. Grace Holloway stood there, dressed simply in traveling clothes. "May I come in?" Grace asked. Lucy nodded quickly, stepping back to make room. Her small room suddenly felt even smaller. It had a bed, a tiny desk, and a photo of Mia stuck to the wall with tape. Grace looked around. Her eyes landed on the photo. "Is that your daughter?" "Yes," Lucy said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Her name is Mia. She is 6. Grace walked over to the photo. She studied the little girl with the bright smile and messy hair. "She has your eyes." Lucy did not know what to say. She still could not understand why this woman was here. Why she had done what she did. Why she cared. Grace turned to face her. I wanted to check on you. After yesterday, I imagine you did not sleep well. I am fine, Lucy said automatically. It was what servants were supposed to say. Always fine. Never complaining. Grace raised an eyebrow. You do not have to lie to me, Lucy. What happened was terrifying. It is okay to admit that. Something broke inside Lucy. Maybe it was the kindness in Grace's voice. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was years of holding everything inside. Tears began to fall down her cheeks. I was so scared, she admitted. All I could think about was Mia. What would happen to her if I went to the labor camp? My mother is too old to take care of her. She would end up alone. She would think I abandoned her. Grace stepped forward and took Lucy's hands. That is not going to happen. I promise you. But why? Lucy asked again. The question had been burning in her mind all night. Why did you help me? 50 million credits. You could have bought a starship with that money. You could have bought a moon. And you spent it on a servant who broke a vase. Grace was quiet for a moment. She led Lucy to sit on the edge of the bed, then sat down beside her. Can I tell you a story? Grace asked. Lucy nodded. I grew up on a colony world called New Bristol, Grace said. It was a mining colony. Poor. Dirty. The kind of place people end up when they have nowhere else to go. My father worked in the mines. My mother cleaned houses for the colony administrators. We had nothing. Lucy listened in surprise. She had assumed Grace came from wealth. From privilege. How else could she have 50 million credits? When I was 12, there was an accident in the mines, Grace continued. A tunnel collapsed. 20 workers were trapped, including my father. The colony administrators could have saved them. They had the equipment. They had the resources. But they decided it was not worth the cost. They sealed the tunnel and declared everyone inside dead. Grace's voice was steady, but her eyes were far away. Lost in memory. My father survived for 3 days in that tunnel. He wrote messages to us on the walls. We found them later, when people finally broke through. He wrote that he loved us, that he was sorry, that he hoped we would have better lives. Lucy's heart ached. I am so sorry. After that, Grace said, I promised myself something. I promised that if I ever had power, if I ever had resources, I would never let someone suffer when I could help them. I would never be like those administrators who decided that some lives were not worth saving. She looked at Lucy with fierce determination. I worked hard. I studied. I joined the Interstellar Relations course and climbed my way up. Every credit I earned, I saved. And yes, I have 50 million credits now. But what good is money if you do not use it to help people? Lucy wiped her eyes. You gave up everything for me. And you do not even know me. I know enough, Grace said. I know you wake up early every day. I know you work hard. I know you send every spare credit to your daughter on Earth. I know you fell to your knees and begged. Not for yourself, but for her. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Before Lucy could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was a male servant, looking nervous. Miss Holloway, he said. Ambassador Corvith is asking for you. His father has arrived at the estate. Grace's expression tightened slightly. She squeezed Lucy's hand one more time, then stood up. I have to go, she said. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens, you are safe. I will make sure of it. Then she was gone. Lucy sat alone in her room, thinking about everything Grace had told her. About the mining colony. About the collapsed tunnel. About a promise made by a grieving 12-year-old girl. Meanwhile, in the main residence, Grace walked into a room where Ambassador Corvith stood facing his father. High Counselor Draven had arrived in person. His cold presence filled the space like winter air. "Leave us," Draven commanded, looking at Grace. "This is a family matter." "She is family," Corvus said. His voice was quiet but firm. "She is my fiancée." Draven laughed bitterly. "For how much longer? Do you have any idea what you have done?" "What she has done? Our family is the subject of mockery across the Empire. A human woman made us look like fools. She followed our own laws," Corvus pointed out. "She did nothing wrong. She humiliated us," Draven shouted. His composure cracked for just a moment. "And you let her. You stood there and let her shame our ancestors." The room fell silent. Draven straightened his robes and regained his cold calm. "I am giving you a choice, son. End this engagement now. Send this woman back to whatever primitive world she came from. Do this, and we will pretend none of this happened. Your position will be safe. Your future will be secure. And if I refuse?" Corvus asked. Draven's eyes were like ice. "Then you are no longer my son. You will be stripped of your title, your position, your inheritance. You will have nothing." The weight of the choice hung in the air. Corvus looked at his father, the man who had controlled his life for decades. Then he looked at Grace, the woman who had shown him what true courage looked like. "How long do I have to decide?" Corvus asked quietly. Draven smiled coldly. "I am hosting a gathering tomorrow evening. Every important diplomat on Harmony Prime will attend. You will announce your decision there, in front of everyone." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused. "Choose wisely, son. Everything you are depends on it." The door closed behind him. Corvus and Grace stood alone in the silent room. "I understand if you want me to leave," Grace said softly. "I never meant to put you in this position." Corvus turned to her. For the first time, his calm diplomatic mask was gone. Underneath was something raw, something real. "When you stood up for that servant," he said, "I felt something I have never felt before. I felt proud. Not of my family name, not of my position. Proud of you. Proud to be connected to someone who would risk everything to do what is right." He took her hands. "I do not know what I will decide yet. I need time to think. But I want you to know that I love you, Grace. And whatever happens, I will never ask you to apologize for who you are." Grace looked into his eyes. "Then take your time, and know that I will stand beside you whatever you choose." Outside, the suns of Harmony Prime began to set. Tomorrow would bring the gathering. Tomorrow would bring the choice, and nothing would ever be the same. The grand diplomatic hall of Harmony Prime was filled with hundreds of guests. Ambassadors from 12 star systems had come. Military commanders, trade representatives, politicians, reporters. Everyone who mattered in this part of the galaxy was present. They had all come to watch a family fall apart. High Counselor Draven sat on an elevated platform at the front of the hall. His silver robes shimmered under the lights. His face was calm and confident. He had no doubt about what his son would choose. Blood was blood. Family was family. No Valorian would give up everything for a human. Grace stood alone near the back of the room. She had chosen a simple black dress for the evening. No jewelry, no decorations. Among the elaborate Valorian fashions that surrounded her, she looked almost plain. But there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself. A dignity that could not be bought with credits or earned with titles. She had no allies here. The other humans in the room were servants, invisible against the walls. The Valorians looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She was a spectacle, an entertainment. The human woman who had dared to challenge an empire. Near the servant entrance, Lucy stood among the other human workers. She had begged to be allowed to attend. She needed to see what would happen. She needed to know if the woman who had saved her would be abandoned by the man who claimed to love her. Mia's picture was in her pocket. Lucy touched it like a good luck charm. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Draven stood and walked to the center of the platform. His voice carried across the hall without any need for amplification. Friends, allies, honored guests. Thank you for joining us this evening. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the crowd. As many of you know, recent events have brought attention to my family. Events that I believe require clarity. He folded his hands behind his back. The Valorian people have stood for thousands of years as leaders in this galaxy. We have built empires. We have forged alliances. We have maintained order when others would bring chaos. And we have done this through one simple principle. We do not compromise who we are. A murmur of approval went through the Valorian section of the crowd. My son, Draven continued, has found himself in a difficult position. He has formed an attachment to a human woman. This woman, despite her primitive origins, has shown herself to be clever, ambitious, perhaps even dangerous. He looked directly at Grace. His silver eyes were cold. She has used our own laws against us. She has manipulated Valorian customs for her own purposes. And she has embarrassed this family in ways that will not be easily forgotten. Grace did not look away. She met his gaze without flinching. Draven turned back to the crowd. Tonight, my son will make a choice. He will announce whether he stands with his family and his people, or whether he chooses to walk a different path. I have faith in his decision. He returned to his seat and gestured toward his side door. Ambassador Corvith entered the hall. He walked slowly, each step measured and deliberate. He wore formal Valorian robes, but they seemed to fit him differently tonight. Like armor that no longer protected him. Like a costume he was tired of wearing. He reached the center of the platform and stood facing the crowd. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes moved across the sea of faces. The diplomats, the commanders, the servants Dot and Grace, standing alone, watching him with eyes that held no judgment. Only love. I have been asked to make a choice tonight, Corvith began. His voice was steady. My father believes this choice is simple. Family or outsider. Tradition or change. Strength or weakness. He paused. But I have realized something these past few days. Sometimes the choices that seem simple are actually the most complicated. And sometimes the path that looks weak is actually the one that requires the most courage. Draven's expression flickered. This was not the opening he had expected. 2 days ago, Corvith continued, I watched a human woman stand in front of this empire's judgment and refuse to be afraid. I watched her use our own laws, not to attack us, but to protect someone who could not protect themselves. I watched her give up wealth that most of us cannot imagine, not for power, not for influence, but simply because it was the right thing to do. He turned to look at his father. You called her primitive. You called her dangerous. But what I saw was something else entirely. I saw honor. Real honor. The kind we talk about in our ceremonies, but so rarely practice. The hall was completely silent. Grace Holloway is more Valorian than most Valorians I know, Corvith said. She understands what we have forgotten. That true strength is not about dominating others. It is about protecting them. It is about standing up when standing up costs everything. Draven rose from his seat. Corvith, think carefully about what you are saying. I have thought about nothing else, Corvith replied. And I have made my decision. He stepped down from the platform and walked toward Grace. The crowd parted before him like water. When he reached her, he took her hands in his. I choose you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I choose a future where honor means something more than tradition. I choose to stand beside a woman who has shown me what courage really looks like." Draven's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Then you are no longer my son." Corvith did not turn around. "I know. You will lose everything. Your title, your position, your inheritance. I know. You will be nothing." Now Corvith turned. He looked at his father with something that was not anger, but pity. "No, father. For the first time in my life, I will be something. I will be someone I can be proud of." The silence stretched. Every person in the hall seemed to hold their breath. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, there was a sound. A single pair of hands clapping. An elderly Valorian man stepped forward. Ambassador Valen, one of the most respected diplomats in the Empire. He was ancient by Valorian standards, with deep lines on his blue face and silver hair that fell past his shoulders. "Well spoken, young Corvith," Valen said. "Well spoken indeed." He continued clapping. And then, slowly, others joined him. Another Valorian stepped forward. Then another. A handful became a dozen. A dozen became 50. Not everyone, certainly not most, but enough. Enough to show that Draven's view was not the only view. Enough to show that change, slow and difficult as it might be, was possible. Draven looked around the hall with disbelief and fury. This was not supposed to happen. His son was supposed to bend. The Empire was supposed to stand united behind him. "This is not over," Draven said. His voice was quiet now, dangerous. "You think you have won something here tonight, but you have only made enemies. Powerful enemies." He swept out of the hall, his loyal followers trailing behind him. When he was gone, the tension in the room broke. Conversations erupted everywhere. Some voices were angry. Others were excited. History had just been made, and everyone knew it. Grace looked at Corvith. There were tears in her eyes. "You gave up everything," she said. "Your family, your future, everything." Corvith smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. "I gave up nothing that mattered. And I gained something I never had before." "What?" "A chance to be the person I always wanted to be." He pulled her into an embrace. Around them, the galaxy continued to spin. Problems remained. Enemies lurked. The future was uncertain. But in that moment, none of it mattered. In the back of the room, Lucy watched through tears of her own. She thought about Grace's story, about the mining colony, about a promise made by a grieving girl. Some promises, it seemed, were worth keeping. 3 months had passed since the gathering that changed everything. The wedding was small. There were no grand halls or thousands of guests. Just a simple ceremony in the garden of the modest house that Corvith and Grace now called home. Flowers from Earth mixed with plants from Valoria. Human and alien stood together under a sky filled with stars. Ambassador Valen performed the ceremony. The old diplomat had become something of a mentor to the young couple. He had seen empires rise and fall across centuries of life. He knew that change was always painful, but sometimes necessary. Lucy stood in the front row, holding the hand of a small girl with bright eyes and messy hair. Mia had arrived on Harmony Prime 2 weeks after the gathering. Grace had arranged everything. A transport from Earth, proper documentation, a small apartment in the human quarter of the station where Lucy and her daughter could live together. "Mama," Mia whispered during the ceremony, "is Miss Grace a princess?" Lucy smiled through her tears. "Something like that, baby. Something like that." When the ceremony was finished, Grace and Corvith turned to face their guests. They were not wealthy anymore. They had no titles, no positions, no political power. But they had something better. They had purpose. "Thank you all for being here," Grace said. "I know the past months have been difficult. Many of you have faced consequences for supporting us. Some have lost jobs. Some have lost friendships. and I wish I could promise that things will get easier." She looked around at the small crowd. Humans and Valorians, workers and diplomats, people who had chosen conscience over convenience. "But what I can promise is this: we are not done. The work we started at the gathering was just the beginning. There are still millions of humans working in conditions that should make us all ashamed. There are still systems that treat people as less than people. And as long as those systems exist, we will fight them." Corvith stepped forward. "My father believed that I gave up everything for Grace, but he was wrong. I gave up a title I never earned, a fortune I never built, a name I was simply born into. What I have gained is worth far more." He put his arm around Grace. "I have gained a partner who shows me every day what it means to live with honor. And I have gained a purpose. Together, we are starting a foundation. It will provide legal support for human workers in Valorian territories. It will advocate for fair treatment. It will be a voice for those who have no voice." A cheer went up from the crowd. Small, but real, the celebration continued into the evening. Food was shared. Stories were told. Laughter filled the garden like music. Lucy sat on a bench watching Mia play with the other children. The little girl ran through the flowers, chasing lights that floated in the air like tiny stars. She had adapted to life on the space station faster than Lucy expected. Children were resilient that way. Grace sat down beside her. "How are you doing?" Grace asked. "I still cannot believe this is real," Lucy admitted. 3 months ago, I was facing 10 years in a labor camp. Now my daughter is here. I have my own apartment. And I just watched you get married." She shook her head in wonder. "I have something to tell you," Grace said. "We want you to be the head of household staff for our new home. The position comes with a salary, full benefits, and housing. But more importantly, it comes with respect. You would not be a servant. You would be a partner. Someone who helps us run this household and this foundation." Lucy stared at her. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Grace smiled. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who understands what we are trying to build. There is no one better for this than you, Lucy." Mia ran over, breathless and laughing. "Mama, look." I caught one of the lights. She opened her small hands to reveal a tiny glowing insect resting on her palm. Grace leaned down to look. "That is beautiful, Mia. Do you know what it is called?" Mia shook her head. "It is called a hope fly," Grace said. "On the world I grew up on, people believed that if you catch one, your wish will come true." Mia's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? So you should make a wish." Mia closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched in concentration. Then she opened them and let the insect fly away. It rose into the evening air and joined the other lights floating through the garden. "What did you wish for?" Lucy asked. Mia grinned. "I cannot tell you." "Then it will not come true." Grace laughed. It was a warm sound, full of joy. Lucy realized she had never heard Grace truly laugh before. There had always been tension, always a battle to fight. Maybe now, finally, there could be moments of peace. But peace, Lucy knew, was never permanent. 2 weeks later, the summons came. High Counselor Draven had filed a formal complaint with the Interstellar Court. He accused Grace of manipulation, fraud, and interference in Valorian internal affairs. He demanded that she be expelled from Valorian space and banned from all territories under Valorian influence. The trial was held in the Great Chamber of the court. Representatives from a dozen species sat in judgment. The gallery was packed with observers. News drones hovered near the ceiling, broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. Draven presented his case with cold precision. He spoke of sacred traditions violated, of customs manipulated, of an outsider who had corrupted his son and embarrassed his family. Then it was Grace's turn. She stood before the court in simple clothes. No lawyers beside her. No prepared speech in her hands. Just herself. High Counselor Draven has accused me of many things, she began. He says I manipulated Valorian law. He says I interfered in internal affairs. He says I am a threat to his way of life. She paused, looking at the judges. And he's right about one thing. I am a threat. But not to Valorian culture. Not to Valorian tradition. I am a threat to cruelty. I am a threat to any system that treats some lives as worth less than others. She told them about the mining colony, about her father, about the promise she made when she was 12 years old. I did not come here to attack anyone, she said. I came here because I fell in love. I came here to build a life with someone who showed me that not all Valorians believe power is more important than compassion. And when I saw a woman being dragged away for an accident, facing 10 years of punishment while wealthy guests laughed at her tears, I could not stay silent. Her voice grew stronger. You ask if I manipulated the law. I used the law exactly as it was written. If that embarrassed the High Counselor, perhaps he should ask himself why a law meant to show mercy was gathering dust while people suffered. She turned to face Draven directly. You want me expelled because I represent something you fear, change. The possibility that your empire might one day judge people by their actions, not their species. The possibility that your own laws might be used to protect the weak instead of punishing them. She turned back to the judges. I am just one person. I have no army, no political power, no ancient family name. All I have is a belief that every being in this galaxy deserves to be treated with dignity. If that belief makes me dangerous, then I accept the label proudly. She sat down. The chamber was silent. The judges conferred in whispers. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. Grace Holloway had committed no crime. The complaint was dismissed. In the gallery, a small group of supporters cheered. Among them was Lucy, holding Mia on her lap. Draven left the chamber without speaking. His face was stone, but everyone could see the defeat in his eyes. He had used his greatest weapons, and they had not been enough. Months later, Lucy stood in the garden of Grace and Corvith's home. The foundation they had built was growing. Hundreds of human workers had already received help. Legal representation. Fair treatment. A voice. Mia played nearby. Chasing hope flies through the flowers. Grace walked over and stood beside Lucy. Together, they watched a child laugh in the fading light. I never thanked you properly, Lucy said quietly. For what? For everything? Saving me. For bringing Mia here. For showing me that things can change. Grace smiled. You do not need to thank me, Lucy. You thank me every day by being someone worth saving. A young Valorian boy from a neighboring house wandered over to watch Mia play. He looked curious. Mother, he called back to a Valorian woman standing nearby. Why is everyone so nice to the human lady? His mother looked at Grace, then at Lucy, then at the children playing together. Because she taught us what honor truly means, the mother said softly. The suns of Harmony Prime began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Lucy thought about the journey that had brought her here. The broken vase, the cold floor, the moment when all hope seemed lost, and then Grace, walking forward when everyone else turned away. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change everything. Sometimes one person standing up for another could move the stars themselves. Lucy put her arm around Mia and watched the lights begin to glow in the garden. A new dawn was coming, and it would be beautiful.